the Biden administration once again overstepped the bounds of the law and common sense with its notice of interpretation, technical term, that, as promised in one of the very first executive orders signed by President Biden, girls will lose protections to biological boys presenting as girls, acting as girls in public schools if schools abide by this guidance from Washington, D.C. What can parents do? What can educators do? Well, joining now with more is Meg Kilgannon, Senior Fellow for Education Studies here at the Family Research Council. Meg, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tony. It's great to be here.
Okay, so the Department of Education taking a court decision on Title VII, which pertained to employment, taking those principles, which had nothing to do with the court case, and now applying those to Title IX in public education. Is that right?
That's correct. The notice of intent interpretation is basically informing everyone that if you were to file a claim of having a civil rights claim at the Department of Education, they are going to interpret Title IX in a way that means that the definition of sex is no longer simply male and female. You're a biological man or biological woman. They are expanding that to include sexual orientation and gender identity. So but even in the Title VII case, it didn't go as far as what they're trying to apply it here in this case to Title IX. That's right. And the Title VII case even went so far as to say that we're assuming that the definition of on the basis of sex is biologically male or female. So they're really jumping the shark on this one. They promised they would do it during the campaign. They've threatened to do it. The radicals at the Department of Education have threatened to do it since they got there, and now they've actually done it.
So, Meg, let's take Tennessee. Last month, Tennessee signed a bathroom bill protecting access to biological sex in the public education, meaning that girls can have the safety of going into a bathroom and not knowing that a boy is going to be barging in there who says he's a girl, but a biological boy. Will that be torpedoed by this?
Well, that means that someone who feels like their civil rights are being violated by such a law will be able to appeal to the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, and they can issue an opinion on that. You would think that if you were in the education space and you saw all of this energy in the states around lawmaking around gender identity as an issue, that they might take a pause and say, well, gee, maybe we should wait and see what's happening. Maybe we should take our cue from the states and from the school systems in the states. But no, they're going to force this agenda down from the top on the states.
And so this would also apply to the sports bills, the women's sports bills, that those schools or those states that have these protections for women that they won't have to compete against biological men, they may have to defend themselves against suits brought on behalf of students by the Department of Education?
Right. That's right. Absolutely right. And the other ramifications of something like this, one that particularly bothers me is the idea that separate records would be kept, that a student would be in a school and decide to identify as the opposite sex at school, and records would be kept under another name, but that information would be hidden from the parents. Everything that went home to the parents about their minor child would use their given name, their birth name, the name the parents use, but the records kept at school about that child in their quote-unquote safe space would use another name and another identity. It's completely outrageous.
Unbelievable.
It is.
Unbelievable how they're undermining parental authority here. Now, let's put this in context with what the Department of Education does, what the federal government contributes 7 to 8% of the overall educational dollars for most states. So, I mean, the states are not beholden to the federal government. They can tell them to take a hike. And I think most parents would probably, if they knew that money was being spent well, would vote for an increase to avoid this asinine policy. push that is coming from this administration.
That's right. And the schools that do rely on that federal money are the poorest of schools. They're the schools that don't have a property tax base to support their educational infrastructure, and they rely on federal dollars to make up the difference. And now, even though it's not technically stated in this particular piece of guidance, the Obama administration certainly said at the time, and there's no reason to think that this administration wouldn't do the same, your federal dollars are tied to your willingness to advance this agenda.
30 seconds, Meg Kilgannon. What can parents and local officials do?
Well, parents and local officials need to pray about this issue. You need to parents need to review the policies of their schools and insist on policies that protect children's rights and their identity as male or female, not an interpretation of gender identity. You need to find out what the policy in your school is. You can no longer just assume that this is not in your school. You need to assume that it is until you prove otherwise. And you need to consider running for office.
All right. Meg Kilgannon, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate all the great work you do here at the Family Research Council.
Thank you, Tony. It's such a pleasure to be here.